Welcome to TRID for BytePro administrators. We're excited to share how BytePro's 8.5 release helps you simplify your TRID transition. Please note that this overview may include references to feature functionality of BytePro Enterprise that may not be available in BytePro Standard. That said, the general functionality and administrative concepts are similar. The content in this webinar is provided for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal advice for your situation. Please contact your legal counsel to determine the manner in which the TILA-RESPA integrated disclosure regulations affect your business. Our goal today is to describe the items you will need to review and configure to support your organization's TRID compliance with BytePro. If you haven't already, you should first watch our TRID overview video. It's located on the training page of our support site. We'll try to briefly describe feature outcomes of the admin settings we discuss. That said, you may find the material here more insightful if you're already familiar with information presented in the overview. In this video, we'll discuss ways you can control various aspects of TRID user compliance. We'll cover some of the default settings, screens, documents, fields, and features that are either new to 8.5 or have a direct impact on TRID compliance features. Let's start with the defaults you'll need to set up. 8.5 introduces a new default category for TRID. Here you can set the time of day for lock expirations and loan estimate fee expiration. For each, you'll set both the standard time as well as the daylight savings time values. If you offer balloons, you'll want to indicate whether to include mortgage insurance and/or escrows in the disclosed final payment. If you offer construction loans under TRID, indicate whether you will disclose escrows during the construction phase. Also in the TRID defaults, you can customize the language for the intent to proceed acknowledgement. If we customize the language, you'll see that our edit is now included on the printed form. You may have noticed that there was not a setting in the TRID defaults to automatically set the loan estimate to disclosed or to benchmark the APR upon printing. The legacy settings to mark GFEs as delivered or benchmark the APR on TIL printing do not apply to TRID loans, although they continue to apply to legacy applications. For TRID loans, users are now prompted as to whether they wish the disclosure event to be logged on a case-by-case basis as they print. If they are simply printing to preview the content and not disclosing, they can make the appropriate selection. There is no separate admin setting to automatically log the event. Now let's take a look at fee setup. You still set up fees in the GFE closing cost setup, but there are a couple of noteworthy additions we should discuss. First, you'll want to set up the fee names you want to use for TRID loans. You'll enter that fee description here in line name. When 8.5 was installed, we copied your existing GFE names into this TRID line name. Your pre-TRID applications will continue to use your original GFE fee name entered here. And you'll also want to set the TRID block assignment. Review and edit these values based on your organization's compliance requirements. And here's a cool new feature. Once you get all your TRID name and block assignments complete, you're going to want to make sure your undisclosed loan pipeline is updated to reflect your compliance changes. If the fee name or TRID block is locked, you can apply the new setting to the undisclosed pipeline using the corresponding drop-downs for each found here. When the 8.5 update is installed, for any fees that are assigned to the legacy GFE block number 4, title services, BytePro will automatically add the title dash verbiage to the beginning of the TRID fee name. This is a one-time edit of your fee names upon installation of 8.5. The fee line name will not be altered based on future edits to fee parameters or with subsequent system updates. For optional fees, TRID requires that the word optional appear in parentheses after the fee name. Do not add this language to your fee name. Instead, indicate if the fee is optional here. Within the loan record and on printed forms, the optional verbiage will be appended if the fee is optional. Also, any optional wording will be removed if the fee is not indicated as optional. The new integrated disclosure includes the appraisal notice language that we historically included in the ECOA notice. You may not want to duplicate this disclosure item, so in the ECOA defaults, you can omit the duplicate language for both TRID and pre-TRID loans by checking these boxes. If you do need to disclose the appraisal language outside the loan estimate or ECOA, we've also included a standalone ECOA appraisal notice document. In the Change Circumstances defaults, you can now manage a list of change circumstance reasons and restrict what closing cost items they're used for. Let's take a closer look. Here we've opened an existing reason. You can prescribe a reason code and description, as well as define a category. The category list corresponds to the 6 types of circumstances described by the reg and also includes a no reason needed category for those items to which a tolerance doesn't apply. You can preform notes, as well as restrict, require, or make notes optional for the user within the loan record. In this case, the admin has not restricted fees that can be associated with this reason, but if we take a look at the reason, no reason needed, you'll notice that the restrict fees box is checked, and we see a grid of closing cost items that will be allowed for this reason. At installation, the no reason needed reason includes the prepaid and reserve items that are not subject to a tolerance. You can add or edit allowed items for each of the reasons. And depending on the type of closing cost item we select, we will be presented with the appropriate sublist of individual items for selection. Continue to add, edit allowed fees for all of your reasons. The auto select indicator means that when the user selects this particular reason, any eligible fees will automatically be selected for update, rather than the user individually having to check the eligible items. You'll want to be aware how the reason category can affect your disclosure records. Here I've added a new reason and I've set the category to settlement charges. When updates are applied, the system will always update the last disclosed values for the loan. However, if your reason category is settlement charges, the baseline disclosed amounts used for the 10% tolerance, they're not updated. All other reason categories will result in an update to the baseline values as well as the last disclosed values. And why is that? Well, although it might seem counterintuitive, regulatory guidance regarding the use of the settlement charges reason provides that the baseline should not necessarily be updated when a fee affecting the 10% bucket is revised. Now, that's not to say that a cure would be required. To be clear, any cure for the 10% bucket will be determined by comparing the baseline disclosed amount to the current amount. But don't worry, if the 10% tolerance has been exceeded, BITE will use the most recent disclosed amount to determine any cure. The treatment of the 10% baseline amount is admittedly confusing. You can read more about handling of changes under the Settlement Cost Reasons category in Section 19E3, Romanet 4, Part A, and more specifically, Subparagraph 1, Romanet 2 of the Regulation and Official Interpretations. The following new screens support TRID features. You're going to want to make sure that the appropriate BITE Pro users are able to access the screens associated with their functions. And likewise, the following new documents support TRID compliance. You'll want to make sure the appropriate BITE users are able to access the documents associated with their functions. You may also wish to create validations of your compliance requirements and apply those when printing these documents. TRID requires specific language on certain forms delivered to the borrower that include closing costs but are not a loan estimate. These BITE forms fall squarely into that category. As reviewed in the TRID overview video, for these listed forms, the required language will automatically be included if the application date is on or after 8/1/2015. So there are no new versions of these forms to administrate. They will automatically include the verbiage when applicable. TRID introduces some new data points that are distinct from legacy GFE data points. And that said, some things are still the same. The GFE delivered and the LE delivered status are the same field in the database, just displayed differently for the LE. So all of your object permissions that are set to be disabled upon delivery of the GFE will still function in the same capacity when the LE is delivered. While the earliest close will be calculated differently for TRID loans, the field itself is still the same. So, for instance, a validation rule that enforced the earliest close would work for both TRID and pre-TRID cases. Note that the GFE good-through date is different than the loan estimate's fee expiration date. They're two entirely different fields. If you have rules and/or macros associated with the old GFE good-through date, you may need to re-engineer those for TRID. Especially because the table should not change after disclosure, you might want to secure the Use Alternate Cash to Close setting, which is located in the Loan table. And if your organization deals with refinances that involve adjustment credits such as impound transfers or MIP refunds, you may want to restrict the use of the alternate table for certain roles or certain loan scenarios. The servicing disclosure on page 3 of the loan estimate isn't exactly a new field, but your folks may not be accustomed to completing it this early in the loan process, and roles that prepare initial disclosures may not currently have access to it. You may wish to set up validations and/or macros to help your users with proper entries. Circumstances may require that the loan number be omitted from early disclosures, and that's done with the override feature. If you want to disable it, you can remove access and object permissions. It's in the File Info table. For TRID loans, disclosure events are captured and stored in the disclosure log. You may wish to control what roles may edit, delete, or add entries to the log, as well as individual field access within each disclosure record. Access to each of these can be set in object permissions in the File Data Disclosure Log Entry table. In much the same way, the same is true with Change Circumstances log. Out of the box, access to these functions, as well as the individual event details, are turned off. You'll need to address who has access to edit the log and the related log entries. You can find these object permissions in the File Data COC Log Entry table. The closing disclosure contains at least 3 new notions not historically disclosed by most lenders. The user needs to select how partial payments would be applied in servicing, applied to the loan, held in a separate account, or not accepted. If escrows are waived, the user must select the reason for the waiver, whether they were declined or not offered for the loan program. You will need to also indicate whether state law protects the consumer from liability in the event of a foreclosure. Obviously, this setting can vary by state. So if you intend to prepare the closing disclosure from BITE, you may want to create validations and/or macros or training to assure these items are completed appropriately. On page 5 of the closing disclosure, you may need to point out the proper usage of the real estate brokers. The borrower's realtor is the selling agent in BITE, the realtor making the sale. The seller's realtor is entered in BITE as the listing agent. The new disclosure and change circumstances logs provide a more robust history of disclosure activity, but the data is contained within grids, and that can throw you a bit of a curveball when it comes to reporting. We've made your disclosure activity reporting a bit easier. When you add a new report and the system prompts you to add a field to the report, check out the disclosure event category. I can report off any of the log entry items included here, but I can more specifically call any of those field values from the initial or most recent loan estimate, the initial or most recent closing disclosure, or the most recent of either disclosure. This allows you to call out a specific event when creating validations, macros, or reports. So that's the 101 overview of TRID administration. If you run into issues we haven't addressed here, feel free to contact our support desk at 800-695-1008, extension 2. Or if you have a specific TRID compliance challenge that we have not addressed, we'd love to hear about it. Please email your TRID feature enhancement request to trid@bitesoftware.com.